So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tony Wan, and I am the managing editor at Edsurge. And I want to thank the Lehman Foundation for inviting me to have this amazing opportunity to speak at this wonderful conference. Now, before I got on my plane, I went to go watch the Legos movie just to relax a little bit before preparing my speech. And I left the theater feeling very inspired because, without spoiling the movie for those of you who haven't seen it, the main story is that you have a group of people who are fighting against the world where the only things that you can build have to be done according to the instruction manual. Now, of course, as most of you know, the point of Legos is not to build what's on the box or what's in the instruction manual, but it's really to make up your own instructions, to build whatever your own creativity and what your imagination desires. Now, I think this is a simple but powerful message that also relates to the ways that technology is changing the instruction manual for how we think about accessing and delivering education today. And I would argue that technology is changing the way that the industry and the marketplace operates as well. Now, of course, the edtech industry is not a new idea. You've already had schools and teachers, you have investors and foundations, and you have companies and entrepreneurs already involved in edtech in some way. But historically, the problem is that these three groups, they don't really communicate very well with one another to share what they're doing. So as a result, what you get is that even though you may have people who are doing similar projects with similar goals, it's really hard to figure out who's exactly doing what and what's actually working, what's not working, and some of the lessons learned from the mistakes and failures of the past. So one of our main missions at Edsurge is to bridge the decision makers in these different communities and to encourage them to share information so that they can all make better choices, whether it's a school or a teacher trying to think about what technology to buy or adopt, whether it's an investor trying to decide which startups to fund, or whether it's an entrepreneur like some of you in the audience trying to decide which feature or what tool to build. And so we try to accomplish our goal as a media data startup. And what that means in our work is that first and foremost, we report on the latest news and trends in the edtech industry to build an audience and to build a smart audience. And second, in the process of reporting on the news, we are collecting a lot of information and data about the different schools, the products, and the companies that we write about. And our vision for this database is to be a resource that anyone can access to find answers to questions like, what's the most popular Portuguese math tool out there? Or what schools are using Angry Birds in their classroom? We also host events like this one to connect the builders and buyers of education technology to encourage them to get together in the same room and build relationships and to communicate with one another. We also build data and analysis tools to help people make sense of all the information out there. And there is definitely a lot of information that we've seen about the edtech space in the past couple of years. This is just a small sample of the companies that participate in our events. And an easy way to really see this volume of activity is in financing data. You follow the money. This is a graph compiled by a company called CB Insights that shows the amount of venture capital and the number of deals that have gone into edtech companies for every quarter for the past 4 years. And so you can tell that the blue represents the amount of money and the orange represents the number of deals. And you can tell that even though there are some peaks and valleys, that the graph generally trends upwards. In 2013 alone, people estimate that there was over $1 billion invested by VCs in edtech companies. And we actually expect that number to grow in 2014. Because in the first 3 months alone, we already saw over $500 million of investments in edtech companies. And we try to, this is our internal research, where we try to break down the funding by different categories. You can see that MOOCs, education service providers, and professional skills received most of the funding. Now, this graph doesn't include the biggest deal that we saw, which is in a Chinese company called Tutor Group. tutor group that raised $100 million for language learning services. This is another way that we break down the funding by category. And so if you see all this venture capital funding, the next question you may ask is, well, where are these companies coming from, right? Where are these companies coming from that I can invest in? One way that we can address this, try to answer this, is to look at the number of edtech incubators and accelerator programs. In 2011, you mainly had two, mostly in the US, in Imagine K-12 and Stardo. Shortly afterwards, you had other US edtech incubators follow in the footstep. And now, in 2014, you got incubators and accelerators for edtech startups all around the world, in places like Colombia and London and Israel. And what's also interesting about the growth of edtech incubators is that you also have very specialized edtech incubators. The one in the center called Colab, that is an incubator co-founded by Zynga, the gaming company. And as you may expect, it's an edtech accelerator for startups building learning games. Now, aside from the venture capital and from the incubators, we can also track the growth of the physical community as well. So there are now a lot of efforts to bring people together in a physical space to connect the educators, entrepreneurs, people of different backgrounds, all with an interest in improving education. A good example of an organization that does this is Startup Weekend Education. And what they do is they organize events all throughout the world, and they invite anyone who's interested in ed tech, whether you are a student, a teacher, a parent, a developer, a designer. Everyone is invited to come together for one weekend to pitch an idea, to build a prototype, and to develop a business model around your idea. Now, of course, not everyone who participates actually ends up building a company, but that's not the point of a Startup Weekend Education. The point of these events is to give people the learning experience into what it's like to be an edtech entrepreneur and to really encourage entrepreneurship for social impact and social missions like education. Now, similar to Startup Weekends, well, in 2011, it started with 6 events, all mostly in the United States, and today, the organization has almost 50 events around the world, including some in Brazil. Related to Startup Weekends are meetups, which offer another opportunity for the community to come together and talk about education topics. Meetups are very informal gatherings that anyone can organize around a common topic or a passion. This is a map of all of the different education and technology meetup groups that I just took from the website a week ago. And you can tell that there are over 1,000 meetup groups in over 400 cities, around 60 countries in the world. So, I mean, that's pretty impressive. Now, the edtech community is also growing online as well. And Twitter has become actually a really popular destination for educators and entrepreneurs to find and to connect with one another. It's estimated that there are 2.4 million, that should be 2.4 million tweets related to education every day. And many of them happen in these hashtags called Twitter chats, which are basically groups of people who sign on to Twitter on a regular basis to talk about an education topic. Now, if you go to this URL on the bottom right, this is a big spreadsheet that people have compiled of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Twitter chats for all kinds of topics. You can see that near the top there is a hip-hop ed Twitter chat, which is about focusing on using hip-hop in education. So I would argue that all of this activity is definitely really exciting, but I think as a journalist, as an editor, I would say that most of this excitement has been built largely on promise and potential. And that for the industry to really take the next step, to go to the next phase, we need to move from the promise and potential phase to really the proof phase. So don't just tell me, what your product is going to do or how you're going to change the world. You need to really show me that you can actually implement your solution in an actual classroom and that it can actually scale. So some of the questions, there have been a lot of questions that have been raised in response to the promises that people have made. One of them is the promise that digital technologies and the internet will bring about better access to quality education materials, and sometimes for free. So this is a wonderful promise, but you got questions. What does quality mean in education? Just because it's really easy for people to create content, to upload content, and to share content, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for everybody. So who's going to be in charge of curating some of the content so that it fits what each learner needs? Another problem that's not very sexy but very important is about bandwidth and network infrastructure. I know that we're saying that bandwidth and mobile access is increasing, but it's still a significant problem. Even in the United States, where most people would consider as a relatively well-developed country. This is a study done by a group called the Education Superhighway, which found that 80% of the schools in the US now don't currently have enough bandwidth to meet their digital learning needs, and 91% don't have enough bandwidth to meet their 5-year goal. So, big issue. What's the point of having all these materials online if most kids cannot access them? It's kind of silly, right? Another promise and potential is about big data and how big data is going to drive adaptive learning and personalized education. Well, when you actually put this in the classroom, questions arise over whether the teachers are prepared to use this data. How are they going to actually make sense of the data that you provide and to tie it to results and outcomes? And another question that I don't think people actually thought about was over issues of privacy and security, right? Thanks to our friend Edward Snowden and the NSA, everyone is actually really sensitive about data privacy and security now. And people are extremely sensitive when it comes to the children's data being used and being shared between governments and companies. So we've seen considerable pushback from data privacy groups and parents against efforts by companies to collect and share student data, even though they need some of this data to help their adaptive learning engine. And finally, on the business side, people are saying that edtech is a goldmine opportunity for companies and investors. But even though they've raised all the money that I just showed you in a graph, a lot of companies still have trouble finding revenue model and sustaining their business. The Codecademy guy earlier admitted that he doesn't have a revenue model yet. And I think that is a question that people are still trying to figure out. Only in the Silicon Valley or in the US can you raise millions of dollars without making a cent in revenue. And so I raised all of these questions not to sound like a pessimist, but I'm actually really encouraged that we're going to be able to solve some of these questions. But we will only be able to do it if everyone, from educators to entrepreneurs to investors, get involved, including the government and the researchers. And one of the most promising things that I've seen is the number of teachers who go on to start edtech companies. Because who knows about a pain point more than a teacher who's had to live, breathe, and teach in a classroom? So this is just a sample of some of the teacher-led startups. And with all this change happening, of course, it's very exciting, and I am reminded of a quote that I heard the former president of Harvard University say at a meeting once. He said that change often takes much longer to happen than you want or expect, but once it does, it moves at a pace that you cannot control. So, thank you very much.